So you've just bought a Panasonic GH1. Now let me take you through the features of your new camera. So on the top of the camera, we've got the on-off switch right here. You just flick that up. You can see it light up. Our main dial selector switch, we got intelligent auto, the red button. The camera controls even more. It basically takes over for you. So if you're outside and you got the kids in tow and whatever, maybe you just set it on intelligent auto and you click away and you don't have to worry about adjusting anything. You switch over to program, where the camera will choose your shutter speed and your aperture. Switch to aperture, where the camera operator photographer picks the aperture and the camera will set the corresponding shutter speed to give you the correct exposure. When you're using an aperture mode, the most useful feature, why you would use aperture, is you control the aperture, and by controlling the aperture, you control the depth of field. What that means, for people who aren't familiar with depth of field, it means the amount in the scene that is in focus. So for instance, if you're using the camera set at 3.5, which is a very wide aperture, you get shallow depth of field. Assuming the camera's over here, shooting this way, if you focus on the middle lens cap here, you're going to get this much in focus. As you get closer to the lens, it's going to be more out of focus. As you get further away, it's going to be more out of focus. If you're shooting the same shot, but if you set the aperture up to f16, all of it will be in focus. So this is variable. As you change the aperture, you get more or less in focus. Set it to shutter speed. You control the shutter speed. So you can play around with that. The camera will adjust the exposure for you. And then manual, where you set the camera, you set the aperture and the shutter speed. This is manual film, and you can actually enter in custom settings, so you can set the camera up a certain way, and next time you go back to it. Scene mode will let you access the different scenes on the back of the camera. This is a night portrait mode. Very useful if you're taking pictures at night. This will add flash to a slow shutter speed. So some of the scene modes on this camera are on the top dial. Some of the other scene modes you access through the screen. This is a digital macro setting. It's a little flower. Sports setting. There's a very fast shutter speed to stop action. Mountain range, which is typically set on infinity. It's for landscapes. And then the portrait mode, which will give you a soft focus background. The person will be sharp and in focus, and then the background will be in soft focus to give you a less distracting background. This being the artist palette, which you can go in the menu and change settings to control the color and make very creative decisions. One of the very useful features on the camera is you can adjust the white balance. When the cameras come to you from the manufacturer, the white balance is set on auto, AWB, auto white balance. Now, what that means, for anyone who's not familiar with white balance, all light sources, be it the sun, light bulbs, fluorescent tubes, candlelight, anything, has a particular color temperature. What that means is the cast, the light that it emits, is a certain color. For instance, candlelight is very, very red, very rich, orangey red. Fluorescent lights tend to be a little bit bluey green mostly, sort of give you that bad sort of green skin tone. Tungsten light bulbs, the old style round screw-in light bulbs, are sort of warm, orangey. And the camera, by using the white balance setting, and especially the auto white balance setting, will compensate for those. It'll make especially the skin tones. This is where it's very important. It comes in if your skin tone is very orange or very green or whatever, people immediately recognize that the color's off. And auto white balance, what it does, if you've got a scene where you've got mixed light, say you've got windows over here, you've got a lamp over here and fluorescent light above my head, that's going to mix it all up and jumble it up. Auto white balance, when you've got mixed light, will average it out and give you something in the middle, give you a relatively good rendering of the color. Now, if you want to take a little more control over that, you can go into the menu and change the white balance. There's a little button on the back, so you can change from auto white balance to sunny, cloudy, shade, tungsten, or sometimes called halogen, flash, and then there's custom settings if you want to dial in something for a particular Look, for one thing, you can do that. A couple of very useful settings are cloudy and shade. So you're outside, all of a sudden a cloud comes in front of the sun. The white balance is a little different. If you set your white balance to cloudy, it'll add a little warmth to it. It warms it up, giving it a little bit of yellow, more yellow orangey look. So skin tones look better, and the shadows that basically a cloud will put a shadow over the whole scene. The other setting that's very useful is shade setting. So what happens is, if you say you've got a house that's casting a shadow, ordinarily, if someone is standing in the sun, they're being lit by the warm color sun. If they walk around the other side of the house, they're being lit by the blue sky. So they're not being lit by the direct warm colored sun, they're being lit by a blue sky, which is cooler. So all the shadows, everything looks sort of blue. So even, the skin tone's going to look bluer, shadows everywhere in the scene are going to look bluer. By dialing in the shade setting, it adds significantly more warmth, making the scene look normal, making it look as if it was lit by direct sunlight. Very useful feature. The features on the camera, there's quite a few. It's a fully automatic camera or fully manual, meaning exposure, everything. All the controls can be manual. The same with the lens. You can switch, a little switch up here, you can switch for manual focus lens. Very nice. If you run into problems, once in a while you run into problems where autofocus just doesn't work. If it's very, very low light, or you're shooting through glass, and sometimes depending on certain patterns just won't work. Switch to manual, focus, shoot. Very easy to use. One of the things that people forget very often with autofocus is where the camera's focusing. It's automatic, but it may not be focusing where you want it to focus. Where this comes into play, one of the most common things, is if you're taking a picture of two people or two things, and you put the camera pointed right at the middle. The problem being, the camera may focus on the wall behind them, or the scene behind them. Now, the cameras have what's called a preset. The shutter has a preset, so meaning when you push it down halfway, it locks the focus. Depending on where you point the camera, you'll see the little green rectangle light up. Just make sure when you're shooting that lights up where you want it to. For instance, if you've got a house, a lake, and a mountain, if you want the house to be in focus, you can point it at the house with the pre-focus, lock the focus, then shift over and shoot. Very simple technique, but a lot of people don't know about it. By pushing the quick menu button, I can go to the different flash modes. Right now I'm in auto, and then you can see I'm in auto with red eye, force flash on, which is very useful for your taking pictures outdoors where you still want the flash to fire. Change your flash, the way the flash operates for certain situations. One of them, red eye. We're very familiar with how red eye works. The light comes out, the eyes appear red in the photograph. The red eye feature emits what we call a pre-flash. So there's a little initial burst of flash slightly before the exposure. So you push the button, you get a one beep, one flash, and then the main flash, which is more powerful. The pre-flash makes the eyes dilate, so then you don't get the red eye. So it's very useful for getting rid of red eye. The problem with it is you have the issue where there's the delay. There's in some cases, half-second delay between when you push the button and when it actually takes the picture. So if you're photographing a scene where you've got 8 people, they're all lined up and they're expecting to be photographed and that sort of thing, you can use the pre-flash, you can use the red eye feature, eliminate the red eye, it's no problem. Where you want to turn the flash, you want to turn the red eye feature off is anytime you're shooting any sort of moving subject, especially children. GH1 is a micro four thirds system, meaning there's an X factor of 2. So as you're looking at the lens, it's reading 14 to 140. You have to apply an X factor to that, which means this is a 28 to 280 millimeter lens. 28 is still pretty wide, and 280 is actually a very good lens for shooting stuff at a distance. The Lenses are removable, optional lenses. You can get this one, as I said, 14 to 140. Over here we got a 14 to 45. You can also get a 20, a 25. Now the 20 and the 25 are much faster lenses. So just in closing, we're talking about the Panasonic Lumix GH1. As I mentioned, we talked about the many features of the camera. It's got a lot of professional settings, but it's also got a number of consumer, prosumer settings. You can basically use this camera in full auto, everything controlled automatically, auto focus, auto exposure, everything, all the way down to full manual. You can take control of any of the features in the camera if you want to get creative or you're looking for a particular effect. So it's got the full range of features. I hope you enjoyed the review of your camera, and you can get more information on your camera. You can go to livinghd.com. Thanks for tuning in.